Natalie Jackson and Daryl Parks. And please give your colleagues a chance to ask a question, and we can go on and get started. Thank you all for coming to Norfolk State University today.
Thank you. As he said, I'm Attorney Benjamin Crump, and I have with me Attorney Daryl Parks and Attorney Natalie Jackson. We represented the family of Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida, in the matter against his wrongful death in the state of Florida versus George Zimmerman, which was prosecuted by Angela Corey. Also, we've had the honor, Attorney Parks and I, of representing the family of Michael Brown, Jr. in Ferguson, Missouri, as well as the family of Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Ohio, the 12-year-old who was shot at the playground while playing with a toy gun. That was all captured on surveillance video, and the family of Akai Gurley in New York City as well. And before we begin, I want to thank very publicly Norfolk State University and its president, Eddie Moore, its vice president of student affairs, Edward Willis, and the Student Government Association. We are delighted to participate in the Leadership, Education, and Development series, challenging the traditional lecture series through a contemporary approach to engage students in a powerful interactive discussion surrounding contemporary topics with notable members of the local, regional, and national communities. And so before we have Attorney Jackson and Attorney Parks make his comments, I think Attorney Jackson framed it very well when she said what we really have to do is get the young people to ask them the questions so we can have the serious dialogue about how we prevent these cycles of police brutality and excessive force from happening over and over again. And that's never more relevant right now than being able to demonstrate what happens in Ferguson, what happens in Staten Island, what happens in all these instances all around the country dealing with allegations of excessive force is connected also to what happens here in Virginia. And certainly with the recent activities that took place with London Coven, that is something I'm sure the students and these fine National Bar Association lawyers will engage in a lot. Again, I thank Vice President of Student Affairs, Eddie Willis, for having us here and having the foresight and the vision to say this is something our community needs to discuss as well. I give you Attorney Natalie Jackson. We'll take questions at the end.
Yeah, I'll just be very short. With Ben, I'm thankful to be here too. I think that it's very important that we engage with the students because the students have been and young people have been at the forefront of these movements. And so the young people are the people that we, the older generation, we need to, take a cue from at this point. We see the smaller protests as opposed to the bigger marches on Washington. So with the Ferguson protesters, and they're very effective. So the young people are teaching us something, and we look forward to hearing from them too.
Good evening. My name is Daryl Parks, and first and foremost, we want to just let you all know how glad we are to be on the campus of Norfolk State University today to have a serious dialogue with the students here. And hopefully one of the goals that we would have is for them to be a little bit more aware, a little bit more enlightened. Without question, most of us up here actually have a background in student activism as college students. And there's no better place for college students to be more enlightened, more aware of the role that they play at a pivotal point in their lives. So we hope that we can have a very gainful conversation with them about things that we've experienced in Florida and what we've seen other students do in our part of the country to really play a big role in what's happened here. Thank you.
And we'll take any questions, but we do want to acknowledge the students and thank them this evening because it was many students from the Tidewater University communities, whether at Norfolk State, Hampton University, which Attorney Jackson is an alumni of Virginia Union. They all have went and engaged with social media, and when we represented Trayvon Martin, they put on the hoodies and said, "I am Trayvon." when Michael Brown was at the forefront of the media. They all had the rallies saying, hands up, don't shoot. And then certainly with Eric Gardner, we can't breathe. And now certainly as we go and the nation eyes look towards Cleveland, Ohio, with the tragic killing of the 12-year-old kid, Tamir Rice, I'm sure they will continue to be vigilant in that matter as well. But you all also have your issues here that we plan on talking about with the young lady being attacked by the police dog. So it's not so far removed from Virginia that we want to talk about this like it's some abstract issue. This is a very relevant issue for this community, and I'm so glad that the students are speaking up and saying that it doesn't matter whether it's St. Louis or it's New York or Cleveland or Los Angeles. We all have to stand together and say that our community demand more of our police officers. We demand accountability and we demand respect as well. And we'll take some questions.
Yeah, so yesterday, just in light of everything that's happened with Ms. Colvin, yesterday the Norfolk police chief came out and said that the use of force in that incident was unreasonable and that there will be a policy review of the use of canines. We checked in with the NAACP yesterday and they told us that's a step in the right direction, but more needs to happen. Would you agree that it's a step in the right direction, and what else does need to happen?
Well, I'll go first, and I'm sure Attorney Jackson and Attorney Parks would want to interject. The one thing I think you have to do first is acknowledge, let's have a fair investigation into what happened completely. And policy is always important to review, but if people did things illegally or used excessive force, they should be held accountable. And what we see often when people aren't held accountable, then there's no deterrent for future conduct. And so I think we also have to continue to say, if there were bad actors, people acted recklessly with disregard for citizens' safety, that should be acknowledged and they should be held accountable, and there should be something done to deter other law enforcement officers for engaging in other conduct, similar conduct.
Right. I think that one of the things that we see time and time again is we see task force being formed, we see policy reviews being done, but we don't see any action. And I think what the police chief did here was very brave to step out and say that unreasonable force was being used here. So I think the next step to make it so that it's a tangible action is to change the policies and when it comes to using police dogs and when you interact with citizens. So I think, the real test will be when the policies change and the announcement to the community that this case allowed policy changes.
Just briefly, the other thing I would say is that what mentality would an officer have to release a dog on a person who is already surrendered? And so I think there's a mentality that you want to make sure that doesn't exist within the whole department.
And when you say you want to see them held accountable, does that mean?
Well, I'm sure that the community leaders, the city leaders will have to speak to what level of accountability should be issued to a sworn officer, a sworn law enforcement officer, and whether it be suspension or discipline or mandatory training or up to whatever they see appropriate. You want people to say that the system works equally and fairly for everybody, that we're all citizens, and that we expect if the police engage in illegal conduct that they'll be held accountable like anybody else. And so you want the community leaders of this community to be able to certainly show an example to the community that if there was illegal or inappropriate actions taken, that this officer would be held accountable, and send a message that we won't tolerate policing like this in our community.
Ben, I want to add something to what you just said. We notice there's a trend around the country. Most police departments and law enforcement will do up until what that community will tolerate. So whatever the policymakers in that community will set as a standard tends to be how far they will go. So for that officer to feel like it's okay, the community has to set a standard and say, no, it's not okay if that person is restrained already. So you really look, at the end of the day, it's the policymakers. I mean, the elected officials, not just within the police department, but city, county, they set the standard. And so that's where the buck stops.
And so really, as Attorney Park said, it is the community has the obligation to respond, have to speak up, and that's what I think the students here at Norfolk State University are doing. They're speaking up.
Do you think the Trayvon Martin and the Michael Brown case, that is an example or precedence that the police chief seemed like he's trying to be proactive and get ahead of it because he does not? I mean, has this?
Well, I
he
saw.
has some deaths, but is there something good come out of this to make the chief come forward and move forward and be a little more proactive?
Yeah. And give me your name, sir.
Jonathan Cosmo, 13 minutes.
Jonathan, I apologize for interrupting you.
No, you're fine.
It's an appropriate question because I do think when people ask, how do we avoid a Ferguson in our community? How do we avoid a Sanford in our community? I think there's a couple of things that they can do to make people not feel they have to take actions to force their leaders to lead. And that is, number one, to be transparent. Be very transparent from the very beginning. Be very honest with the community. And make sure that you show respect and sympathy to the victim. And a lot of times they struggle with, should we acknowledge this person as a victim? And that's when the community really has to speak up. When you look at those photographs to that young girl and the fact that she said she was surrendering, you say, well, we need to acknowledge that she is a citizen and that she deserves our respect, and she, at least for her injury, we don't know exactly what happened yet, but what you want to do is make sure that they acknowledge her pain and her suffering that they're going through, and they don't do what other people have done in other parts of the country, whether it be Eric Garner or Michael Brown, and you try to attack the victim, because that's the old playbook that they pull out. We know that there's some questionable conduct here, so let's try to attack the victim. And that's what you hope they don't do. So you want them to be transparent, you want them to be honest, and you don't want them to try to engage in this age-old policy of police departments of saying, we're going to attack the victim.
And I think it's very important to say that everything that we're saying, it helps police departments too. So we're talking about the officer safety too, not only community safety. Because when you have communities and officers, they have to work together. It's a symbiotic relationship. So both have to trust each other and rely on each other to do and help to make the society better. So I think that, one of the things, sometimes it seems as though this can be police bashing, and it's not. It's asking for accountability. And also accountability from the citizens.
Are you all involved in Ms. Colvin's case in any way? Has anyone contacted
No,
you for
ma'am.
advice?
No, ma'am. I would say this as we flew into Virginia. Everybody on the plane assumed that's why we were coming. As we got to the airport, everybody assumed. But Vice President Willis, we had to tell him this was planned months before on behalf of Norfolk State, and it's just, as fate would have it, you would have this incident take place, and we'd be talking about similar issues. Yes, sir.
You guys are batting 0 for 3 now so far as these police.
No, let me correct
What
you.
is that?
Let me
No,
correct
I'm
you.
not saying that.
We're civil lawyers. Every case we've recovered. That's the prosecutor's job, and we got to educate people on that. The
Right.
government is the only people that can put people in jail, not private citizens.
I know
All right.
But, considering the 0 for 3 thing, now in Cleveland, they're shifting to an independent investigation. Do you think that'll help your case? Help the...
Let me educate you, because
Yeah, I think
you
it's
still have a misnomer that we have some power more than you.
Right.
We represent the family as civil lawyers. And when you represent the civil case, the only thing you can recover is a monetary award, nothing else. And you hopefully can change policy. Only state attorneys and district attorneys can put people in jail. So Trayvon Martin's case, that was Angela Corey. Michael Brown's case, that was the prosecutor McCullough. New York, Eric Gardner, that was the prosecutor in New York. this case, that would be the prosecutor, whoever your district attorney is. So when we speak up for families and bring attention to them, that's what you're trying to do, because think about all the unknown little black and brown people who were killed in excessive force accusations, and nobody knows their name, and it was swept under the rug, and the grand jury said everything was justified. What we're trying to do is bring attention that black life matters, that brown life matters, that all life matters. And so every time we get attention to that matter, you want to see that as a good thing. That certainly can never be taken as negative. Now, the ultimate result lies with our elected officials if they're going to hold people accountable equally. And that's the mistrust between a lot in the African American community and the police, is when they see things happen to us, nobody's ever held accountable, but yet people in their community are arrested and convicted with very little evidence over and over again. So they say, where's the due process here? Where's the, you know, as Attorney Jack said, where's the symbiotic relationship where it says you owe me respect and I owe you respect, and we owe each other equal justice?
You know, one way you could put your question, we could say the authorities are owing through in protecting the lives of unarmed black people. That's a better put question.
Yeah. And Attorney Jackson, why don't you share that with?
I was saying, one thing I think that is very important for people to understand is that in all of these cases, I think the demand has been for equal justice. It hasn't been for special justice.
Yeah.
It has not been for more justice than anyone else. It's been equal justice, as we saw with the Mike Brown prosecution. You have a prosecutor who changed all the rules when it was time to prosecute Michael Brown. So of course people are going to be suspicious of that. They're saying, why don't you treat us the way that you treated 20 years of grand juries? Why change the rules when it's our turn? So I think that that is the problem, and those are the things at the very heart of the issue, is that when you hear the division among people with different thoughts, there seems to be some confusion that the protesters or the people who are supporting these cases is asking for something special. They're asking for equality, and they're asking for the same treatment.
And you know, the one thing I do want to point out, and I don't know what the time frame is, you know, one of the things we keep talking about is this whole notion of these grand jury proceedings and the secret proceedings that happen. Jonathan, the first thing we said is about transparency. And it's hard for the community, whether it be Eric Gardner, Ferguson, and I would imagine with Ms. Colvin, if they have this secret proceeding and they say everything is justified and let's go on with business as usual if nothing happened. Well, something did happen. Michael Brown is dead. Eric Gardner is dead. This young lady, London Colvin, is horribly injured. And so for you saying that it was all justified, people in their family in those communities are saying, why is it that our lives aren't valued? Our pain isn't valued. When things happen to us, nobody's ever held accountable. And it goes back to this whole fundamental notion of equal justice. Just nothing more, nothing less than if it was anybody else's community. And the young people, we teach them right and wrong. And when they see it, they refuse to look away. Others tend to try to justify, try to explain away. But the young people say, no, we have to call it for what it is. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And we're not against police. Everybody keep trying to say we're against police. We're against bad policing. You're against bad police. You know, and I think everybody should be upset when there's bad policing because it's an indictment on your community. And so we gotta ask the question, why isn't everybody doing like the students at Norfolk State when they see bad policing? It's a societal issue, and if the society doesn't stand up to stop bad policing, then it continues, and it gets worse, and we see it happen more and more. So,
One final question.
If you don't mind if I do, In just a little while, I think at 8 o'clock, some Norfolk State students are going to gather for a peaceful protest. And of course, you're about to talk to many students as previously planned. But these students that are gathering outside for the protest are upset about the Ms. Colvin's incident. What is your message to those students?
First of all, thank you for caring. Thank you for caring, because we have to continue to talk about these injustices, and if we don't speak up about them, God help the next person, the next student, whether it be Norfolk State, New York University, wherever. If we don't speak up, it makes it that much easier for it to happen again and it to get swept under the rug again. I want to thank the young students for with Trayvon, it was the young people. It wasn't the media. We couldn't get media to cover Trayvon at the beginning. It was the young people on social media who started saying, I am Trayvon Martin. And then LeBron James in the Miami Heat put on the hood and say, I'm Trayvon Martin. It's the young people in Ferguson who say, hands up, don't shoot. And you know, every day, it was those young people who did that. And so I think it's the young people who frame these issues, who articulate these issues better than anybody can. And I have no doubt that those young people are going to be responsible, and they're going to do it in a way that is consistent with the protections of our Constitution, and that they're going to refuse to be quiet. And that's the biggest message you could ever give them. Refuse to be quiet. Just don't take it. Say, this is my community too, and our lives matter.
Well, we'd like to thank you all for coming out to this news conference. Also, we'd like to thank Attorney Parks, Attorney Jackson, Attorney Trump for visiting the campus. And we do have an evening event that begins at 7 o'clock. You're all welcome to attend that program. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.